Welcome to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guests today are Angie Lynch and Tracy McKinnon, both from Poverty Free Thunder Bay. Welcome, Angie and Tracy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
So I'd like to just start the show a little bit about yourself. Angie, tell me a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in Thunder Bay?
I did. Well, yes, I did. I've been here since I was 5 years old, so pretty much raised and grown up in Thunder Bay. Yes, it's my town.
Right on. And how about you, Tracy? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm not originally from Thunder Bay. I'm from Southern Ontario. So I grew up an hour south of Ottawa in a city called Cornwall, along St. Lawrence River.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really mixed community too,
It
Cornwall, isn't it? Because
Yep.
you're right next to Quebec, and
Yep.
yeah. And so, tell me a little bit about Poverty Free Thunder Bay. Has this been around for a while, and what kind of activities and what's your mandate there?
Well, Poverty Free Thunder Bay has been around for a long time. I'm not sure exactly the date of inception, but basically we're a group of people, groups, organizations. We're a coalition in Thunder Bay looking to eradicate poverty completely. So that's our mandate, is to work towards eliminating poverty. And we just have a variety of members from all over the community that are involved.
And in the interest of full disclosure, most of the viewers know I'm involved with the Thunder Bay Injured Workers Support Group. We are a member of this coalition with Poverty Free Thunder Bay as well.
Nice.
Yeah. So you guys have contacted us to talk a little bit about the issues that you're trying to raise during this federal election. Really, they're issues you could raise anytime. But there's a few things that have kind of come to the top, I guess. Tracy, I guess one of those you mentioned is the basic income. I mean, we know there was a pilot project and there were people here in Thunder Bay that were involved. What do you want to see the political parties do during this campaign and afterwards?
Hi, Steve. Thanks for your question. So I was a recipient of the Basic Income Pilot Project, which was canceled. What I want to see is those who were left behind and not able to finish the project, I'd like to see them compensated for the time that, at least the 2 years that should have been, the rest of the project.
Right, so there was a 3-year agreement that people would be on for 3 years, and it was canceled kind of halfway through, more or less.
Yeah,
Eh?
wasn't it for 2 years and then with the possibility of extending 3, or was it definite 3?
I believe that they promised a 3-year
up to 3
basic
years, yeah.
income. Up to 3 years,
Up to 3 years,
yes.
yeah.
And so what was your experience with that basic income program? You were a participant, you said.
I was a recipient. It was comparable, very comparable to, I guess, income that I was when I was previously working,
Okay.
minus the taxes. So it was like a livable income, or like just very close.
And so what was the impact on your life?
As I said, it was like a livable wage compared to when I was working, that I was able to afford things that I couldn't afford on OW or ODSP. It could be anything simple, as I was told Angie in another interview a while back. I didn't do anything elaborate with the funding I got from Ontario Basic Income, but I was able to pay my credit cards. I was able to buy... I'm not a vegan or vegetarian, but I do eat healthy. So, to buy like the really good olive oil, it's not cheap, right? So that
Right.
was like one splurge, or like meat again.
Oh my
Something
gosh, I can go
I
buy
know,
meat.
right? Something so simple like meat. Oh my God, I can go buy meat like chicken, or, good proteins, right? Or really good veggies,
Right.
right?
And if you don't mind me asking, so how much was that basic income that you would receive each month?
So I received $1,900 and $1,915,
So $1,900 more or less.
and change, yeah.
And what do we know about, I know the federal government has just created a poverty line. If I recall, that 1,900 is still way below
it's
what the new
way
federal
below.
poverty line is.
I can't speak to that. No, I don't know.
Yeah, it is still definitely far below the poverty line. but it was quite substantially higher than Ontario Works and ODSP pay. So essentially what it was doing was providing people with a more livable income, whereas if you're in receipt of Ontario Works or ODSP, it's very challenging to actually pay market rent and buy healthy, nutritional food. What it did is it just kind of helped to raise people's income enough where they were actually able to pay rent, live a little bit more stress-free. I think a lot of people reported that their stress levels dropped considerably once they started receiving that income.
And so in terms of kind of going forward, you're kind of talking about redress for the people that really their contract was broken. But what about the rest of the policy? Do you think this was a good program, the basic income program? Is it to expand it across Canada?
I think everyone should have a livable basic income, whether it be, above minimum wage, what it is now, a livable minimum wage, or a basic income, or something combination of the two.
So that you can buy meat occasionally.
It's something simple, right? But it's so basic.
That's right. So, I mean, we know
food
that...
should be affordable. Meat should be affordable. And it's not.
And what do we know about the impact of providing a basic income for people? Do we know that it has other ramifications in the community?
I can speak to this one as a person with mental illness, that it wasn't as bad. So a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of complex PTSD, a lot of, I could go on and on. But it wasn't as bad as it was coming off the basic income and trying to get back on ODSP.
You could feel your own health was that much better.
Yes. And then transitioning, like never knowing, right? At least on the basic income, I knew my rent was going to be paid the next month. But during that transition, I wasn't sure because, right, trying to get on it, and how many people are trying to get back on ODSP all at once, and then finding all the documentation that was needed, like a birth certificate.
So there's all this extra dealing with bureaucracy, changing rules, and oh my gosh.
Yep.
So the pilot here in Ontario was a pilot to study what the impacts would be. Now the government canceled it, we won't know what some of those impacts are. But we do know that there was another pilot, right, back in the 70s in Manitoba. And there's some results from that. Can you guys share any information around that?
I don't have a lot of information about the results of the MIMCOM pilot, which was in Dauphin, Manitoba, I believe. But I think that that some of the things that came out of it were exactly what Tracy said. People's state of mental health was improved, their health, their physical health. I mean, it's all about the social detriments of health, right? And so when we can eat well, when we can put a roof over our head, it just makes things so much easier for us to function in everyday situations. And the other thing is, with a basic income, it provided enough income adequacy for people to live better, but it also helped to benefit the local economy because people had more money. So it was a win-win-win for everybody involved, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things in Dauphin they talked about were a reduction in teenage pregnancies, that more people went for higher education, that people's health care costs went down as a result of some of these. We have a few more things to talk about, but we have to take a short break. Please stay with us, and we'll be right back and find out how we can make our community poverty-free. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guests today are two members of Poverty-Free Thunder Bay, Angie Lynch and Tracy McKinnon. Welcome back.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
So we were talking about Poverty-Free Thunder Bay is trying to bring forward issues as part of our federal election campaign that's going on right now, and issues you'd like to see our government deal with. So Angie, one of the areas that you're trying to focus on more attention is on housing and affordable housing. Tell me a little bit about that. What's the issue here?
Well, I think one of our demands from our federal leaders is basically to eliminate homelessness in 5 years. That would be something that we would really like to see happen. We are seeing more and more people without proper homes, without safe, affordable housing, and that's something that we would like to address as Poverty-Free Thunder Bay, but to also call on our municipal, our provincial, and our federal leaders essentially to help work with that, because if we don't deal with it now, it's just going to continue to get worse.
Well, speaking about getting worse, so there has been a number of efforts in Thunder Bay, right, around trying to understand the homeless situation, and there's been these counts that have happened every couple of years, and we've seen the numbers increase substantially from what was it, 2016 to 2018. So what's the ramifications, and why is this happening? Why should we be concerned about homelessness?
Well, I think because it really affects all of us, you know, in terms of, although we may have homes, there's a lot of people that don't. And I think it behooves us to work towards everybody having safe, affordable housing. It's just not good for a healthy society to have people that aren't housed, that don't have homes. So that's one of the reasons why we feel it's very important to begin working on this more and more. In Thunder Bay, typically, we have a lot of like individual single dwellings. And so we need to start looking at alternative ways of housing people, whether it be cooperative housing, transitional housing. Personally, I'd like to see the shelters. I think the shelters are great, but it would be nice for people to have permanent housing rather than having to live in a shelter situation. So it's about looking at, I think it's about being creative with how we can do this. I believe the feds have a lot of money that they're going to be investing in housing, so it's a matter now of figuring out how we can get that money here invested in Thunder Bay. But I think we also have to look at our municipal government as well, even around zoning bylaws and changing things to make it easier for people to create new housing.
So I was listening recently to a program that talked about seniors who maybe now there's only one person left in the family. And it's the family home, and you raised your kids, but now your spouse is gone, and you're all alone in this big place. And the idea of partnering, so a younger person coming in and more or less renting a room for an affordable rent, with the idea that they'll help out. Cut the grass, take out the garbage, whatever can be agreed upon. Is that something that could be one of those angles of I guess, not only connecting people to housing, but also connecting them to other people?
To one another, right. The relationship building piece too is really important, because we tend to live a lot in isolation, and I think that that's not a really healthy way to build community. So I think that would be ideal, some sort of different co-housing solutions, absolutely. And then Tracy also mentioned one of the things she thinks about is the garden housing or little home.
The granny huts,
yeah.
so the in-law suites, so the tiny homes, yes.
And how would that work?
I attended a meeting a few months back. I think there's still a lot of work. It's still in the progress. A lot of, as Andrew had mentioned, right, a lot of zoning bylaws where you can and can't put the structure. So I think once the tweaks are worked out, and I like that. I love that idea.
Creating a little kind of apartment in the backyard instead
Even
of your garage.
even a community within a community, right? For whether it be mature people who are widowed or just never married or whatever, just a place for them to Angie touched on it earlier too, but just even being supported or being around other people rather than being alone and feeling alone. Just because you are alone doesn't mean you have to feel alone, right?
So housing is more than just keeping dry and warm. It's about connections to community as well.
Totally.
And I'm kind of a student of the bottom line and looking at what things cost and trying to figure that out. But I've seen numbers where the public supports for a person who's homeless can be upwards of $200,000 a year, mostly in healthcare costs and policing costs and some of the other support costs. So having an apartment is way cheaper than that, eh?
I
Absolutely.
would say it's an investment.
Yeah, return on investment, and I think that's the thing that people have to start, especially politicians, need to start looking at. What is the return on investment? What's the best way to address these issues that we're all, in the midst of facing? So I absolutely agree. It's much less expensive to provide somebody with a decent housing than it is to support them while they're struggling on the streets.
So another one of those issues really of helping to move from poverty or out of poverty is the issue of education and employment and access to that. So Tracy, what does Poverty Free think? What can we do differently around education?
I don't think I can speak on behalf of Poverty Free Thunder Bay to be more edgy, but I would love to see, free tuition for all, post-secondary, whether it be college, university, trades. We need more tradespeople trained and educated.
And what we've been seeing really, I know myself, putting kids through university, the prices have just been going up and up and up. Oh my gosh. So a person who's living in poverty, what do?
Right.
They don't go to school
They don't go to
often,
school.
or they try, but then whatever effects of poverty will often pull them back out of that educational institution. For instance, if they don't have enough money to buy a bus pass to get to school, or if they don't have adequate food to provide themselves with a healthy nutrition, like a lunch or dinner, all of those things. Like I once had somebody ask me, well, why can't people just get a job? And they said, what is the biggest problem to people accessing employment and education? And quite honestly, the answer is poverty. Poverty is the biggest barrier that people have to jump over in order to access employment and education. Because when you're living in poverty, you just, sometimes we come from a very privileged, at least I do, a privileged perspective where I was able to do all of those kinds of things because my mom was able to help me, but not everybody has that in their lives. And if they're living in poverty, that is the biggest barrier for people to access education and employment. So we need to make it more accessible for people. We need to make it easier, free tuition, transportation maybe. Maybe we could look at free bus for people who have to take public transportation if they're engaged in activities such as education and employment. There's lots of little solutions that can add up to help address those problems.
And I guess the other impact thinking about is, half the people who live in poverty are children.
Yes.
So what is their future in terms of education and training so that they can be more engaged in the work economy?
Right. Yeah. Well, a basic income for the family to help with that would certainly be a move in the right direction. If you look at the First Nations communities, I think their education is federally funded, whereas in the cities, it's provincially funded, and federally they're not receiving enough income to provide adequate education. So that's very important too. We need to just make sure people have equal access to education all over the province, not just if you're in the city.
The youth are our future leaders. They need the education.
Yeah.
So we need to take another short break. Please stay with us and we'll find out a little bit more about creating a poverty-free community. Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and our guests today are members of Poverty Free Thunder Bay, Tracy McKinnon and Angie Lynch. Welcome back to the show.
Thank
you.
So we've been talking about steps that the federal government or the federal parties could take to help eliminate poverty in our community and really across Canada. And we've raised a number of issues so far. Another one is access to health care. So what's your position? What do you want the governments to do in terms of that health care piece?
Well, we'd like to see universal health care. So it's great that people can go to a doctor and see a doctor, but if they can't go and pay for their prescriptions afterwards, then that becomes an issue. So pharmacare would be very important to us, and that is actually a demand that we are asking of the federal government, that will be elected soon, is for universal pharmacare, universal dental, and universal vision care as well. just to round out that whole package. Because yeah, if you go to the doctor but you can't then afford your medication, that becomes an issue. If you're looking for work but you don't have glasses so you can't see, that becomes an issue. If if you're trying to get a job but you have a lot of dental problems that are causing pain so that you can't go to work, then that becomes an issue. So those are some things that we would like universal health care, the whole package.
And there are kind of surrounding issues around healthcare as well that are oftentimes people have to pay for themselves, and that could be chiropractic or physiotherapy, those kind of things. I know in my world that's a big piece. Would you include all of that when you're talking about universal healthcare?
I certainly think so. I think if we're going to be asking and we're going to be demanding this of our leaders, then yeah, let's go for the whole thing. I think a full package of proper health care is essential, and in my opinion, it is always good to ask for everything.
Why not?
So another one of the demands or issues that you've been raising in the election is the issue of reconciliation and our relationship with our First Nations communities, Indigenous folks. What do you want our leaders to do around reconciliation? Tracy, do you have some thoughts on that?
So I guess I can speak to this one a little bit. So I'm Caucasian, but I was adopted by a Métis or Mi'kmaq father at 3 months of age. And after he passed, and then my mom passed. So he passed in 2006, my mom passed in 2009. So after they passed, I was lost. I felt disconnected. It's like I had nothing to connect myself to because I also lost my children. So I was completely lost. I was homeless and living in poverty and sleeping outside. That's what I wanted the Kleenex for. I knew it was coming. And I slept outside in the rain, in the pouring rain. I've stayed at the shelter house myself and then worked there many years later, right? So I did the full circle thing. So I've been on both ends of that. Being homeless and living in poverty and having mental health issues, it just makes everything 10 times worse.
And reconciliation, and like in Thunder Bay, sometimes we think about, well, a number of the folks that are homeless are Indigenous folks, oftentimes coming into our community and not knowing where they fit in. What can we do to welcome folks and create more inclusive communities?
Well, I guess one thing I do is I'm learning their culture. I'm learning their songs in Ojibwe and Oji-Cree. I'm going to their powwows, their ceremonies, their sweat lodgers, their drum circles and sharing circles and sacred circles and MMIW events and, midnight medicine walks and, oh my God, I can keep going. Take back the night walks next week. Just being behind and supporting them as much as I can as a white person in society, and then, learning, having them teach me what they lost is like giving them back, part of their history.
So in a way, reconciliation is a really personal thing for you, and supporting and creating those relationships. What does it do for you? So there's songs I've learned that when I sing a particular one called Wildflower, it's like me calling back, I need the Kleenex again. It's like me calling back to my children that I lost many years ago. So that one hits home. Yeah.
So actually, that's why I have my skirt with me, because I have a drum circle tonight. So thinking to myself that I'm going to be singing a couple of songs tonight, Strong Women. I sang it also out in BC when I was there before I came here. Other than that Strong Woman song. Another one, Women's Warrior, which is a Coast Salish BC song for MMIW and I don't know more. The Women's Warrior, yeah. Just Anishinaabe Kwe, another one we sang last week at Sharon Johnson's Full Moon Memory Walk. So I've often organized these events along with Sharon. She asked me to, organize the hand drummers, which is, I'm always behind the scene. I've seen, some very VIPs in the community say, you're always here. It's like, well, you don't know, but I'm organizing all this, right? Like, that's why I'm always here. Like, I love them. Some don't recognize me without my skirt and my drum. And I've had some people like, we always thought there was two different people. It's like, I love you, Sylvie, but it's just one. Yeah. And just everywhere, because I can't work because of severe mental health and health issues. I volunteer a lot, and I volunteer within Anishinaabe community.
Right on, giving back to the
Giving
community.
back, right?
Yeah. On the kind of the bigger federal level, Angie, is there anything that we're asking those political parties to do around reconciliation?
Oh, well, probably quite a bit, actually. I mean, I think first, let's teach Canadian history in the schools, the real history. I think that's really important. I think addressing the issues that are happening in the First Nations communities. I think of Grassy Narrows, for instance, with the mercury poisoning that's been going on for decades, and they've been trying to capture the attention of the federal government, and they continue to be ignored. I think that's a big issue. The whole drinking water issue on many reserves.
Nishnawbe First Nation for 25 plus years.
Yeah, I mean,
So there's a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of work to
just
do.
going back, I think,
And unfortunately, we're out of time.
Oh.
I want to thank you
Drats.
both so much for coming on the show, and thank our viewers for staying tuned. And we always look for your input on our Facebook page, Community Conversations. Stay safe.